Think about the last time you bit into a fresh plum. That moment when the skin breaks and the juice runs down your chin before you were even ready for it. The sweetness and the tartness hitting at exactly the same time. The deep purple skin against the golden amber flesh inside. It is one of the most satisfying fruit experiences there is. And yet most people have never once stopped to ask where that plum actually came from. Not the grocery store, not the truck that delivered it. The very beginning, the tree, the orchard, the harvest. Because before that plum was sitting in a paper bag on a display table with a sign saying sweet and ripe, it was growing on a tree in California's Central Valley or the mountains of the Pacific Northwest. A tree that was carefully grafted, precisely irrigated, and managed through an entire year of decisions that determine whether the fruit you bite into is extraordinary or ordinary. The United States produces over 1 billion pounds of plums and prunes every single year, and the story of how they get from the branch to your hand is one of the most fascinating and most technically demanding harvests in all of American fruit production. Today, we are going inside that story. Let's go. The United States is one of the top plum-producing countries in the world, and within the U.S., the crop is almost entirely concentrated in California, which produces roughly 90% of all American plums and prunes. The San Joaquin Valley, that long, flat, agriculturally extraordinary stretch of Central California, is the heartland of American plum production, along with parts of the Sacramento Valley to the north. The scale is significant. California alone has hundreds of thousands of acres of stone fruit orchards, with plums and prunes representing a major share of that total. The other significant plum-producing states are Oregon and Washington, where the cooler Pacific Northwest climate produces different varieties with their own distinct flavor profiles and market positioning. But California's combination of hot, dry summers, mild winters with adequate chill hours, fertile, well-draining soils, and the most sophisticated agricultural irrigation infrastructure in the world makes it uniquely capable of producing plums at the scale, consistency, and quality that major markets demand. California plums are found in grocery stores across the United States and exported to markets in Canada, Mexico, Asia, and beyond. Before we get into how plums are grown and harvested, you need to understand something about the plum that most people have never thought about, and it changes how you see every plum you have ever eaten. A plum and a prune are not two different fruits. They come from the same tree. A prune is simply a plum variety that has a high enough sugar content and low enough moisture content that it can be dried without fermenting around its pit. Fresh market plums are typically juicier, more tart, and less sweet, varieties bred for the pleasure of eating fresh. Prune plums are denser, sweeter, and more concentrated in flavor, varieties bred for the drying process that turns them into the dark, intensely sweet dried fruit you know as a prune. California grows enormous quantities of both, and the same fundamental farming and harvesting system manages both crops, with only the post-harvest processing step being dramatically different. Understanding this dual identity of the plum tree is the key to understanding why California's plum industry is so economically powerful. Every orchard can serve multiple markets depending on what the harvest brings and what market conditions favor in a given year. Plum trees in California are grown from grafted rootstocks, a process where the fruiting variety is joined to a compatible root system that provides disease resistance, soil adaptability, and size control that the fruiting variety on its own might not have. This grafting is done in nurseries where young rootstock plants are grafted with buds or stems from the desired fruiting variety, and the resulting trees are grown for 1 to 2 years before being transplanted to the orchard. Once planted in the orchard, plum trees take 3 to 4 years before they begin producing commercial quantities of fruit, and they reach their full productive potential at around 7 to 10 years of age. Well-managed plum orchards in California remain commercially productive for 20 to 30 years, making the initial investment in a plum orchard a significant multi-decade commitment. Every management decision, from planting spacing to rootstock selection to training system to irrigation scheduling, has implications that extend decades into the future, and the best California plum growers manage their orchards with a long-term thinking that most people would not associate with a piece of fruit that costs $1 at the grocery store. The annual production cycle for California plums begins in late winter when the trees break dormancy and begin flowering. The white and pink blossoms that cover the trees in February and March are not just beautiful, they are the entire year's income potential hanging on the branches, and they are vulnerable to the late frost events that can devastate a stone fruit crop in a matter of hours. Plum growers monitor weather forecasts obsessively during bloom season and deploy frost protection measures, wind machines, overhead sprinklers, or smudge pots when temperatures threaten to drop to damaging levels. A single frost event during bloom can eliminate 50, 70, even 100% of the year's crop before a single fruit has formed. After successful bloom and pollination, which requires either bee activity or in some self-fruitful varieties occurs without cross-pollination, the tiny developing fruits begin their growth through spring and into early summer. During this period, irrigation, fertilization, and pest management are the primary management priorities, and California's sophisticated drip and micro-sprinkler irrigation systems deliver precise quantities of water and nutrients to the root zone based on continuous soil moisture monitoring and crop water demand calculations. One of the most important and most labor-intensive operations of the plum growing season is fruit thinning, and most consumers have never heard of it. When a plum tree sets more fruit than it can adequately ripen to full size and quality, growers must manually remove a significant portion of the developing fruitlets while they are still small, typically the size of a marble, so that the remaining fruits receive enough nutrients and water to develop to full market size. On a well-managed California plum orchard, thinning is done by hand by crews who move through every tree and every branch, systematically removing excess fruit at precise spacings to achieve the target final fruit count that optimizes both quality and total yield. It is repetitive, physically demanding work performed on ladders in the early summer heat of the Central Valley, and it requires enough knowledge of the crop to make accurate decisions about which fruits to remove and which to keep. A tree that is under-thinned produces too many small fruits of poor quality that will not meet market standards. A tree that is over-thinned loses potential yield unnecessarily. Getting the balance right requires experience and judgment that develops over multiple seasons of working the same varieties in the same orchards. Harvest is the climax of the entire growing year, and plum harvest in California is a race against both time and temperature. Fresh market plums must be harvested at exactly the right stage of maturity, firm enough to survive handling and transport without bruising, but ripe enough to develop full flavor and sweetness after a few days at the consumer's counter. Harvesting too early produces hard, flavorless fruit that disappoints consumers and damages the brand of the grower and the retailer. Harvesting too late produces soft, perishable fruit that bruises in the picking bucket and degrades before it reaches the consumer. Reading plum maturity is a skill. Experienced harvest supervisors use a combination of fruit color, ground color, flesh firmness tested with a pressure gauge, and soluble solids content measured with a refractometer to determine when each block of the orchard is ready. And because plums on the same tree ripen at different rates, those on the sunny outer canopy reaching maturity before those shaded in the interior, multiple harvest passes through the same orchard are typically required to capture the full crop at optimal maturity. California plum harvest is done entirely by hand, and the harvest crews that move through the orchards during the July through September peak season are among the most skilled agricultural workers in the state. Pickers work with padded picking buckets strapped around their waists, both hands free to reach into the canopy and carefully twist and pull each plum from its stem with a motion that detaches the fruit without tearing the stem from the spur, because a damaged spur means no fruit at that position next year. The pace is demanding. Experienced pickers fill their bucket repeatedly throughout the day, carefully dumping each load into large field bins positioned between the rows by tractor. A skilled plum picker can harvest several hundred pounds of fruit in a single working day, moving through the orchard with a speed and efficiency that looks almost effortless to an observer, but represents years of physical conditioning and learned technique. From the field bins, freshly harvested plums move within hours to packing houses where they are washed, sorted, sized, and packed for the fresh market or directed to the drying operation for prune production.
Fresh market plums go through optical sorting machines that evaluate each fruit for size, color uniformity, and surface defects at processing speeds far beyond human visual capability, then are packed into clamshells, bags, or bulk display trays for retail. Prune-bound fruit goes to dehydrators, large facilities where the plums are exposed to carefully controlled heat and airflow over 24 hours or more until they have lost the moisture content that transforms them from fresh plum to dried prune. The resulting prunes are then sorted, sized, and packed for both retail and food service channels. The flexibility to direct fruit toward either market based on quality assessment at the packing house is one of the economic strengths of California's integrated plum and prune industry.
The people behind California's plum harvest are a community rooted in the San Joaquin Valley, multi-generational farming families who have built their operations over decades, and a harvest workforce that is overwhelmingly made up of Latino farm workers, primarily from Mexico and indigenous communities in the Mexican states of Oaxaca, Guerrero, and Michoacán. These workers bring the physical endurance, the technical picking skill, and in many cases the deep agricultural knowledge of their own community's farming traditions to the California orchards. Many of them return to the same farms year after year, building relationships with the growers and a knowledge of specific orchards, which blocks ripen first, which varieties need the gentlest handling, which trees have the most productive upper canopy that makes them genuinely irreplaceable during the critical harvest window. The skilled farm worker who can move through a plum orchard at pace without damaging fruit or spurs is not a commodity. They are a specialist. And the California plum industry, for all its technological sophistication, depends on their skill absolutely. The challenges facing California's plum industry are significant and in some cases existential. Water scarcity is the most pressing. The San Joaquin Valley sits above a depleted groundwater aquifer and depends on both groundwater and surface water deliveries from a state water system that is increasingly strained by drought and competing demands. Water costs for California fruit growers have risen dramatically in recent years and are forcing difficult decisions about which orchards to maintain and which to fallow. Climate change is disrupting the chill hour accumulation that plum trees need during winter dormancy to flower and fruit properly. Warmer winters mean insufficient chill in some years, leading to poor bloom set and reduced yields. Labor availability is tightening every season as the workforce that has powered California fruit harvests for generations ages, and younger workers seek opportunities outside of agriculture. And competition from imported plums from Chile, South Africa, and other Southern Hemisphere producers keeps pressure on prices during the California off-season in ways that affect the market positioning of domestic fruit year-round. Despite these pressures, California plum growers continue to innovate, developing new varieties with better flavor, better shelf life, and better consumer appeal, improving irrigation efficiency through precision technology, and investing in the worker housing, wages, and working conditions that attract and retain the skilled harvest workforce their operations depend on. The next time you pick up a plum at the market, feel its weight. Press your thumb gently against the skin and feel the slight give that means it is close to ready. Think about the Central Valley orchard where it grew, the frost event in February that it survived, the thinning crew that removed its neighbors so it could grow to full size, the harvest worker who twisted it from its spur with practiced hands in the July heat, and the cold chain that raced it to your market in the narrow window between picked and perfect. That is not just a plum. That is a year of decisions, a lifetime of skill, and one of the most carefully managed fruit stories in American agriculture, all compressed into a piece of fruit that fits in the palm of your hand.